under the warm studio lights. Chang Wook leaned back in his chair and smiled in that quiet way that always gave him away. His words came softly, without a trace of pretense. "People think it was just acting," he said. "But for me, it was something that stayed long after the camera stopped." It was the first time he had ever spoken about Ha Ji-won like this, without hesitation, without the arm of professionalism. There was something in his voice that carried the weight of years, like a song that had waited too long to be sung. Of their first meeting, as if recalling a dream that never faded. The set of Empress Key was alive with energy that day, crew rushing, light rigs humming, but when she entered, time seemed to still. Ha Ji-won wasn't the kind of woman who filled a room with noise, she filled it with presence. She greeted everyone with a simple bow and a calm smile that reached her eyes. Chang Wook remembered feeling an unexpected steadiness in her aura. Confidence that drew him in without a word. "She didn't have to try," he said. "She just was." Their early days together were nothing extraordinary on paper, but in memory, they became the heartbeat of a story no script could write. Between takes, they exchanged glances more than words. Sometimes, it was just a shared laugh over a mistimed cue. Sometimes, it was silence that spoke louder than any dialogue. She had this way of laughing, he recalled. It wasn't loud. It was warm, like sunlight through a window you didn't know you needed. At first, he tried to keep his distance, professional, cautious. But curiosity betrayed him. He found himself watching how she rehearsed. She took care of younger staff members. How she kept her focus when everyone else grew tired. She didn't demand attention, he said. She earned it without even noticing. What started as admiration began to shift into something more intimate, an invisible thread tugging quietly between them. One afternoon, during a long day of shooting, Ha Ji-won slipped on the wet floor of the set. Instinct overruled thought. Chang Wook reached out and caught her by the arm. For a heartbeat, the entire world seemed to shrink to that single moment, the touch of her wrist, the soft inhale of surprise, the small smile that followed. "It was nothing," he said, shaking his head as if still embarrassed by the memory. "But I think that was when everything changed. Not for her, maybe, but for me." He didn't flirt in the usual way. There were no rehearsed compliments, no grand gestures. Instead, it was in the small things, the way he remembered how she liked her coffee, the way he adjusted his tone when she was tired, the way he listened. "She could tell when you were pretending," he said. "So I stopped pretending, bit by bit." His quiet sincerity began to pierce the surface of her composure. She started laughing more easily, teasing him back, letting her guard down in tiny, beautiful ways. One evening when the crew stayed late to reshoot a scene under the pale glow of set lights. Between takes, the air turned colder, and she wrapped her arms around herself. Without thinking, he took off his coat and placed it over her shoulders. She looked up, eyes meeting his, neither of them saying a word. The silence stretched, soft but charged. "I remember that look," he murmured. It wasn't romantic yet, but it was real. For Chang Wook, winning Ha Ji-won's heart wasn't a conquest, it was a process of understanding. "You can't win someone like her by chasing," he said. "You have to walk beside her until she stops and looks back." Over time, he learned her rhythms, when she needed space, when she needed laughter, when she simply needed someone to stay. He described the days of filming not as work, but as a kind of quiet companionship. They would sit together after long scenes, sharing small talk about music, food, or family. Tease him for overanalyzing lines, he would laugh and tell her she was too perfect at pretending not to care. Somewhere between those exchanges, something unspoken began to bloom. "I didn't even realize it was happening," he admitted. "But every time she smiled, I caught myself wanting to make it happen again." As the production drew toward its end, he started to dread the silence that would follow. The thought of not seeing her every day felt heavier than he expected. "I used to think love had to be dramatic," he confessed. "But she taught me that sometimes it's just peace. The kind that makes you breathe differently." When asked what it meant to win her heart, Chang Wook hesitated, then smiled, tender, humble. "Maybe I didn't win anything," he said. "She just let me in." And that was how the first part of his story unfolded, not in confessions or declarations, but in the spaces between. It wasn't fireworks or thunder, it was a quiet sunrise that caught him by surprise. He had not conquered Ha Ji-won. He had simply learned how to see her, and, in that seeing, found a version of himself he never knew existed. Rain had stopped by the time Chang Wook walked out of the interview studio that night. But his thoughts lingered somewhere years behind him, on a set filled with echoes of laughter, lights, and the woman who changed everything without ever trying. He had told this story for the first time, yet even now, it felt incomplete, like a melody missing its last note. In the months after Empress Ki ended, the world moved on faster than either of them expected. Awards, schedules, new projects, everything came like waves. In quiet moments, when the noise faded, he found himself remembering the in-between spaces, the late-night rehearsals, the way she brushed her hair behind her ear. She gave him when he forgot a line and tried to hide his embarrassment with a grin. Those fragments returned to him not as memories, but as small pieces of warmth that refused to fade. She was different off camera, he once said softly. On screen, she was powerful. But off screen, she was just human. And that's when I really saw her. They met a few times after filming Wrapped, press interviews, industry events, quiet dinners with the cast. Meetings always carried a strange tension, as if both of them were trying to protect something fragile that only existed when no one was watching. He remembered one evening at a wrap-up gathering, she laughed across the table at a joke someone else made, and for a moment, the world blurred around her. He didn't speak, just watched, quietly grateful that he got to be part of her orbit, even from afar. People often asked him if he ever confessed to her. What fans sensed between them was real. He would smile, dodge the question, and change the subject. But when asked again, years later, he simply said, "You don't always need to confess to make something true." There was a time, he admitted, when he thought about telling her. A winter evening, during a reunion dinner for the cast. Snow was falling outside the restaurant window, slow and silent. She arrived late, cheeks flushed, hair wrapped loosely around her neck. They talked like old friends, easy, warm, familiar. And when the night ended, turned to him, smiled that quiet, knowing smile, and said, "You still look the same." He didn't answer right away. He wanted to tell her she hadn't changed either. She still had that glow, that calm gravity that pulled everyone in. But the words caught in his throat. Instead, he laughed. "You too," he managed. Simple and small. She nodded. And in that shared stillness, he realized something. Love doesn't always ask to be spoken. Sometimes, it just exists, softly, without claim. Chang Wook said he learned more about love from that silence than from any romance he'd ever known. "She taught me that affection isn't about possession," he reflected. "It's about presence. Just being there, without asking for anything back." There were rumors, of course, endless stories written by people who wanted to believe the fairy tale continued off-screen. But the truth, as he told it, was simpler. Drifted apart, as people do. Not from conflict, but from life. Different projects, different paths, different versions of themselves. Yet, whenever they met again, there was always a small spark, recognition, warmth, respect. "It's like meeting an old song," he said. "You forget the lyrics, but the melody stays." During a later interview, someone asked what he would say to her if they worked together again. He smiled. That same quiet smile he had when he first spoke of her. "Probably thank her," he said, "for teaching me that the best kind of connection doesn't fade, it just settles somewhere in your soul." There's a story he tells rarely, but a message he never sent. One night, after a long day of filming a different drama, he came home exhausted. The television was on, and by chance, old rerun of Empress Ki was playing. There she was, fierce and graceful as ever, and for a moment, the years folded away. He typed a message, "You still have that magic." Looked at it for a while, then deleted it. "Some things," he said quietly, "don't need to be said twice." When he speaks about her now, no longing, no regret, only gentleness. He doesn't talk about what could have been, he talks about what was, and how that was enough. "I think love has to end," he said once. But sometimes, it just changes form. It becomes respect, gratitude, inspiration. Last time they crossed paths was at an award ceremony. Cameras flashed. The red carpet gleamed. And for a few seconds, their eyes met. She smiled first, that same soft, unguarded smile he remembered. He bowed slightly. And they moved on. It lasted maybe 3 seconds, but for him, it was everything. Walking off stage later that night, asked about it by a reporter. You and Ha Ji-won looked happy to see each other again. The reporter said. Chang Wook laughed lightly, a little shyly. We were, he answered. Some people leave a mark you don't want to erase. He doesn't call what they had a love story. He calls it a shared moment in time. A connection built not on grand gestures, but on trust, warmth, admiration. Maybe no man could win her heart, he said with a half smile. But for a while, she let me stand close enough to feel it beat. That was more than enough. As the interview drew to a close, Chang Wook's tone softened once more. If I ever did win her heart, he said, it wasn't because I tried. It was because I listened, to her, to the silence. Spaces where real feelings live. Outside, the evening air was cool, heavy with the scent of rain. He looked up at the sky, hands in his pockets, and for a moment, there was a trace of that boyish grin, the same one he wore years ago on set, when she laughed for the first time because of him. Stories don't need an ending, he said quietly. Just stay, beautiful, unfinished. Exactly where they belong.